Welcome to the Rich Planet Starship. I'm Richard D. Hall. Now, on last week's show, we covered the Berwyn Mountain UFO case from 1974 with researcher Scott Felton. Earlier this year, I recorded an interview with Scott, and I only screened part one of that interview. On today's show, I'm going to repeat part one and also broadcast part two, in which Scott describes an attempt by the police to frame him for a crime, which he believes may have been done to prevent him from carrying out metal detection activities in certain parts of Wales. I'd just like to ask you first, Scott, what first drew you to the UFO subject? Because you used to do a lot of hunting, and I believe it was that connection shooting that you had an experience that drew you to the UFO subject.
Well, I've always been an outdoor type. I used to do a little bit of hunting in my old days, shooting, fishing. I trained in gamekeeping when I left school, and as a consequence I've always been outdoors, and I've spent thousands of hours, if you like, out at night with very little better to do than watch the night sky. I've seen all sorts of things flying around, mostly explainable, satellites, meteors burning up, that sort of stuff. I've always believed, because of a scientific interest, scientific background, in extraterrestrial life. Right. I believe the universe is brimming with it. It's spaced out. But over the years, I've come to believe that in some cases, some of this extraterrestrial life and intelligent extraterrestrial life, should we say, is a little bit closer than we might have bargained for. I'm not one of these people who go out and see things every night and it's always an ET craft. I would say I've seen very little in life that I could not explain, but I have on one occasion seen something in the 80s which really fired me up.
So this was in the mid-80s, and you were very keen on shooting ducks.
Yeah, at the time.
Did you eat the ducks that you used to shoot?
Always.
Always.
No
right.
point in shooting something if you can't eat it.
All right. Well, so you weren't actually shooting ducks on this particular night, but you were doing duck reconnaissance, I believe. Tell us what that is.
Well, I don't have the exact date because UFOs in those days didn't really mean that much to me. I just knew of things like that. But on this particular occasion, I was out a couple of weeks before, it would be before the 1st of September, the latter half of August. I was doing some reconnaissance of ducks that were flying in to particular places on the river, sewer outlets and stuff like that.
Reconnaissance.
Yeah, well, they love that sort of filth. Yeah. Basically, I was just taking notes of what times the ducks were flying in a certain state of the tide. So come the start of the shooting season a fortnight later, I'd be in position to bag myself a few. But on this particular occasion, it was just a little bit before dawn. And
this was near the Mersey?
Yeah, it was on the banks of the River Mersey.
On the banks of the Mersey.
I was walking along the promenade just before dawn. It was still dark, but you could see wading birds running along the edge of the tide, which was about 100 yards out, the river channel. And I had my little dog with me, a spaniel. And
Springer Spaniel?
Yeah, a little Springer Spaniel. And she was running about, and she often used to stick her nose through the fence, and she'd sense on the wind, and she'd lift a leg up and cock a tail. Pointing if you like.
Pointing, yeah. So that's what they...
That's what they sort of did. She did it a lot. And she was quite an obedient dog. So when I'm sort of sneaking up, I need her at my side. Yeah. And I was calling her, and she'd always come. But on this occasion, she stuck her nose through the fence, and she was, I don't know, transfixed, if you like.
Was this looking out onto the river?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, she was just looking out. But we were on a promenade, and there's a sea wall going down, maybe 12, 15 feet down to the shingle and the mud. And on this occasion, she was there, and I called her, and she ignored me. I called her, she ignored me. So I went back, and she was still sniffing through the fence. So I just looked over the fence, over the sea wall, and down onto the shingle. It was black with the darkness of the night, but also more particularly black in the shadow of the sea wall. And then all of a sudden, this light came on, just a few feet below me. And to my surprise at the time, it was just a glowing sphere, a white luminous sphere.
A white glowing sphere, all right.
Yeah, it just came on like a light bulb coming on.
Right.
So whatever it was doing before, it was doing it unilluminated.
Right. And the dog could presumably sense it.
Well, I assume it did, yeah. Whether she could hear it or smell it, or she certainly couldn't see it. Neither of us could see it because it was down below us.
Right.
But something about it, I believe, the dog picked up on.
Right.
And it caught her interest so much.
So what sort of size are you talking about, Scott?
Well, I'm saying about this sort of big, this sort of
About
size.
the size of a football, maybe?
Well, not quite as big as a football, larger
Right.
than
So
a
just a
cricket ball.
sphere, just
yeah.
suddenly comes on.
Just a
Right,
sphere,
right.
yeah. But
did it move or?
Well, not at that point, no.
Right.
Where what was interesting about it,
It was floating in midair above the water then?
it was floating out actually above the mud. The water
Above the
was,
mud.
the tide was
All right.
100 yards away. This expanse of mud and shingle. It was low tide. And what I did notice that it was hovering.
Right.
And maybe a foot, no more than 18 inches off the mud. And I could quite clearly see from the glow of it, the luminosity, I could see the mud and the shingle underneath. That's how I knew it was hovering. It lit up the ground underneath it.
Right.
And it was very, very bright light. Well, I got the impression that its size, so to say about this big sort of thing,
Yeah.
that was because of the light. I got the impression any density and any solidness, any object was actually a lot smaller than the
So it
middle.
was glowing with a kind of an aura.
Yeah, like an aura.
Right.
Yeah.
So it then moved.
Yeah, it seemed that just took a few seconds. I'm looking at it. And then it just moved off in a relatively straight line, straight out across the mud and the shingle towards the river channel.
Right.
And it kept a straight course. It still hovered above the mud. But it seemed to, like, I don't know, to give the impression it was like a mild zigzag along that straight line, or a wobble, or something like that. And I watched it, and it probably happened quite quickly, but it seemed several seconds before it reached the edge of the tide.
Yeah.
And what actually happened was all these flocks of wading birds and seagulls and things were running up and down the edge of the tide, and this light went right into the birds.
Right.
And as a result of that, all the birds erupted off with the alarm calls and sort of cacophony of sound just all over the place, panicking birds.
So that was possible confirmation that it was a real object then?
Well, yeah. It was quite. It wasn't my imagination.
Yeah.
And at that point, this light went out, or at least disappeared. It either went out as the birds erupted around it, or it actually entered the water. And I lost sight of it that way.
So it may have gone into the water, you think, possibly?
Yeah, possibly, yeah.
All right. So that sparked your initial interest in UFOs, although it's not what you would term a classic flying saucer type UFO experience. Very intriguing nonetheless. So you then started taking UFO magazine and reading up on UFOs.
I didn't buy it every time it was out, but if I saw it on the shelf, I'd get it and I'd read.
Graham Birdsall's magazine.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I believe you even wrote to UFO magazine and had some of your letters published.
Well, that was a much later date, more or less in the last few months of publication before he died.
2004, 2005 sort of time.
Yeah, I imagine so.
So you actually informed UFO magazine of this experience?
Yeah, I once wrote about it, yeah.
You wrote about it?
Yeah.
So, because I believe Graham Birdsall actually responded to what you said.
Yeah, I had a letter published, and it was a bit of a, I don't know, a sarcastic footnote at the bottom, really. This again is demonstrating my sort of more scientific background. Right. I'm only interested in facts and getting things sorted out. I'm not interested in the ethics and morality of certain things. I just believe get the facts out and let all the rest settle down with the dust. But yeah, I'd made some reference in the letter to people going on about global conspiracies to cover up the UFO thing, and people were claiming they'd seen aliens and contacted them and were abductees and all that. And fair enough, but I was the sort of person who said, well, if it's the government covering things up, it's the responsibility of the UFO fraternity to uncover it. Right. Because you'll never get disclosure. I'd never believe disclosure will come. Right. And it was a case of saying, well, one of the things you could do is acquire your own alien or technology. Because everyone talks about meeting this stuff, but no one ever seems to actually do anything about it.
So
And I suggest, well, what I actually said was in relation to the sphere was, had I been there 2 weeks later when I saw the sphere,
with your gun,
I'd have been armed.
right?
And I'm not one of these awestruck people. It was a very curious sight what I saw,
Yeah.
but I didn't go, you know,
Yeah.
and gobsmacked by it. And I'd have been 2 weeks later,
You would have shot it.
I'd have shot it.
Right. Maybe I shouldn't laugh there, but
And Graham Birdsall didn't see. I don't think he saw the funny
yeah,
side of it.
and he commented, "No wonder they don't reveal themselves." That was
Yeah,
his
that
comment.
sort of thing. Yeah,
Right.
and of course there was also a little bit of flack about it from certain people, but thereafter. But I don't care about that. I wouldn't like to say what the outcome of such an encounter would have been, or whether it would even have been effective. But I would have given 2 battles.
Right. Right.
And well, from me, my point of view, it's a case of, let's say for argument's sake, had I given 2 barrels, and it was a mechanical device of some sort, because it's all technology, someone or something built it, and you were able to drop it onto the mud, I would have been in possession of perhaps extraterrestrial technology.
Yeah. I mean, this is the alleged technology that's possibly involved in making crop circles. A lot of people say that balls of light are witnessed above crop circles.
Since then, when I looked into it, I realised there was a connection.
I'm not talking about the man-made planked crop circles, because we must distinguish between the two in that case.
Yeah, it takes all sorts to make a world.
Yeah. Okay, Scott. So you claim only to have ever had this one experience. You've only seen what you would term a UFO once, and you believe that many of the worldwide UFO cases that are reported are not genuine UFOs. They're explainable in, well, you tell me what you think what UFO cases are.
Well, I've found people who are interested in UFOs just as interesting as the subject itself.
Right.
And because of I'm the sort of scientific person where, let's say for argument's sake, you get people like top astrophysicists who say aliens can't come here because of things like the time factor and speed of light and all
Yeah,
this
they
business.
can't travel faster than the speed of light.
All that
things
sort
like
of stuff.
Yeah.
And on the face of it, the sums add up. It can't be. But I should really be in their camp, but I'm not, because I believe somehow, although I agree with their science as we understand it today,
Yeah.
and we're not experts, there's plenty of stuff to be discovered yet.
Yeah.
Maybe these more advanced entities have actually just found a way to get round it.
Exactly. Well, as Bill Hicks once said, maybe we don't know everything.
Yeah,
You
well,
know,
we don't know
it's
everything.
as simple as that, isn't it? You know.
Even our technological achievements and intelligence might be increasing exponentially all the time, but we've still got a long way to go.
But you do believe that there are some cases, for example, Bentwaters and the Berwyn case in Wales, that were genuine UFOs and possibly extraterrestrial intelligence.
Out of the thousands of, or even perhaps millions of cases that are being recorded, and people claim to have seen, a significant number are genuine cases.
You're from Liverpool originally, but you spent a lot of time living in Wales, yeah?
Yeah.
And you speak Welsh as well. So that kind of is, again, another reason why you became interested in the Berwyn Mountain UFO case. We believe that there is various establishment disinformation being put out on this case, and we're going to cover that in the documentary. But just, you know, there are various books that have been written which have said, well, nothing happened here. And just give us a broad outline of the disinformation, Scott. You know, how extensive is it? How much effort do you think the authorities have gone to kind of cover up the Berwyn case after it had happened?
Well, it is extensive. I believe that the Berwyn case is unique. It's the most unique UFO case in Wales, if not the whole of the UK, in the sense that it's almost entirely in the public domain. If you compare it with, say, Rendlesham Forest, that particular incident was almost entirely within the military. So you've got similar cases, if you like, both being covered up in 2 different sorts of situations. As regards disinformation, even when I first started looking into the Berwyn case, there was things like, there was a guy called Arthur Adams who allegedly found some mineral with electrical qualities that could reproduce itself once it was drained. And there was stuff on the internet. Arthur Adams went to the crash site on Berwyn and things like this. And this is where he found this stuff.
Yeah.
And it was in the Daily Express or the Sunday Express.
Yeah.
And I looked into all this, and they were all dead ends because it was just people were just making things up.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I've gained more knowledge over the last sort of 18 months in this case. It was originally Timothy Good, the famous author and ufologist. He put me on to Margaret Fry, who has been investigating this case for many, many years, a Welsh UFO researcher who you know.
Yeah.
And like I say, we are making a film about this case, and the more I've learned about it, the more I realise that there is disinformation being put out. There are multiple stories about what happened, and I'm of the mind that that has come from very high up source, that they've been put on the internet and through various people to muddy the waters. And for me, that attracts me to this case, because I think, well, if they're bending over backwards to lie about it, then there's something really important about this case, and we hopefully are going to uncover new information in our upcoming documentary.
Well, Margaret Fry, of course, I got in touch with Margaret some years ago, and we've hit it off since then. We've collaborated, but she had a stockpile of information she collected,
right,
and she shared that information. There's another problem within ufology is some people don't share. They keep it all to themselves, and that might as well be a dead-end piece of disinformation because it's worthless. But she shared, we collaborated, and as a result of that, we made some good progress.